Welcome, everybody. If you're new, this is an event from Repurpose Your Purpose. I'm going to tell you a little bit very quickly about it and make sure you're in the right place this morning. Okay, so this is a conversation about changing careers and moving abroad. So two huge challenges. Okay, and I'm super excited to ask questions to Mariella and Shar and Alessandra about their journey from wherever they were from to where they ended up to and what happened in the process. All right, so here's a quick agenda. The quick intro, which I'm doing right now. We're gonna get into the panel discussion. I'm gonna have a portion of the time dedicated to your questions. You can put them in the chat until then. And then I'm gonna invite you to stay for an optional extra time. That's after 9:30 a.m. my time, so that's after our official time. It will not be recorded, and it's just a way if you want to have a little bit of networking with each other and talk about what came up for you during this conversation. Okay, if you're new to this, my name is Aurora Menegallo. I help people change careers, and I was actually inspired to do this event because I hear from so many people that they would love to travel and they would love to move abroad and do something else. So I wanted to dedicate one of these panel discussion events to that topic. I am also working with individuals and organizations that really want to grow in their purpose and in their life. All right. This is something that it's a little bit nostalgic now that everything is online, but I do share some pictures from these events that started in 2017 when they were in person at the time in Los Angeles. And I share them because when we come together online, we often forget how important it is that we are sharing this space together. And so I really want to invite you, as you're here with me today, to be present to the fact that we're not in the same physical space, but we are creating a beautiful shared space online. And by your listening and your presence, you make this possible. And you actually make the conversation better. Believe it or not, we, as I ask the question and the panelists answer, we feel your presence. We feel that you're tuned in and listening. So please help me co-create this space. All right, if you're looking for more Repurpose Your Purpose events, I have a mini workshop online on April 14th, how to network as a career changer. I'm gonna share the link later in the chat. And here are all the things that I do: one-on-one coaching, group programs, and online events. Right now, everything is online. All right. So if this is your first time, it might be a little bit awkward for you. For everybody else, you know how this works. We always tune in for a minute of silence so that we can bring ourselves here in this space. And I'm going to ask you, as you do that you really tune in with your heart and not just with your head. Okay, so that again, we can really co-create the shared space of transformation and powerful sharing today. Ready? Let's do it. So now that we're all here, what I want to really invite you to is a different kind of listening today. And here's why. So we tend to think of, whatever we're trying to do, whether it's changing careers or moving abroad, since we're tackling two things today, as something really, really personally difficult. And on one hand, that's true. Any journey is unique to you. Your journey is unique to you, right? On the other hand, changing careers and moving abroad are incredibly common steps. And I find that the best way to really find your way in the world is to recognize that both things are true. On one hand, Your journey is unique to you. And on the other hand, you are sharing the same journey taken by many, many people. And it's in that fine line in between that you can relax and listen for the wisdom that each panelist will be sharing and their experience. And you can listen for the wisdom that arises in you. And I think this is the biggest thing that I've discovered that I really like to share with people is that we think that we are getting wisdom from a person, right? So, okay, she said she did that, so maybe I have to do exactly what she said, but that's not how it works. You have to listen for the wisdom behind it. And as you listen in that relaxed place, something inside you that shows an idea or something that would work for you will spontaneously arise. Okay, so if you've never tried this, try it today. And I'm gonna invite the panelists to introduce themselves in just 1 second. Before I get that, I wanna thank every one of you for coming today. And also special thanks for those of you that could donate to this event and help me keep all these events free. So without no further ado, if I said that right, can I have each one of you wonderful panelists introduce yourself, and you can start whoever you want. Just go right ahead.
Okay, I'll start. I'm Alessandra Marinetti. I'm calling from San Francisco, California. I'm originally from Italy, lived in a few other countries. And I used to be a teacher. I used to teach Italian and German. And I made several changes in my career. And now I am in corporations, and I focus on customer education, customer training in technology companies.
So thank you. Me. Thank you. Welcome.
Hello. Charlene here. You guys feel free to call me Char. I am currently in Lisbon, Portugal. I've lived abroad for about over 3 years now. Originally, spent about 3 years in the UK in London, and I've been here in Lisbon for about 5 months. So still very new to this space, to this country. I am originally from Detroit, and I spent 10 years as a technology consultant working with Deloitte Consulting, primarily focusing on financial services clients. It involved a lot of travel and a lot of, it was very fast paced and really interesting career for anyone who's interested. But I was also inspired following the passing of my father to reconsider my overall journey in lifelong career. And I transitioned did some freelancing, and then transitioned into being a social entrepreneur. I've recently as last year, founded my own company, and also am the founder of the Expat app. This is an app I created for the Black expat community, and it is the first of its kind. So very excited to share that journey with you all today.
Thank you for coming. I'm so excited to hear more about it. Yes, and Mariella.
Okay. Hi, my name is Mariella Marie. I am happy to invite folks to participate in Char's app. I absolutely love it, and I'm like checking in and seeing all the beautiful things that she's doing. So she's practicing what she's preaching. I just want to give you I see you on that. So I'm originally from Los Angeles, California. I'm currently in Patagonia in Argentina. We've just moved here with my partner about 2 years ago. We're trying to set up shop down here in the South, but I've spent most of my time in Buenos Aires in Argentina. As far as living outside of the States, I've been living outside of the States since 2012. I wear many hats. It's really hard for me to define what I do, but right now I'm currently freelancing with Power to Fly to interview and moderate chats with women and non-binary people who work in tech. And then I have my own project called the Positive Force Team, and we curate, I'm the creative director there. We curate provocative digital media. So I hope to invite, I hope to see you all subscribe to my newsletter so you can keep up with all of the great content that we're sharing here. And I'll dive more into that a little later. But Aurora, I had the pleasure of interviewing her about, I guess, maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago on Power to Fly. So I'm so happy that, we are changing seats at the table. And I'm happy to share and inspire folks who are listening now to take the leap of faith, as I said before we started recording, to get to know yourself and the world from a different perspective. So thank you for inviting me.
Oh, thank you. I'm really excited to have all three of you here. And actually, my first question for you is, how did you end up where you're at? Like, did you have a feeling about that country, that city? Did you just randomly ended up there following, I don't know, like chance happenings in life? And so before you answer, just want to remind everybody, I don't like to call on people, meaning the panelists right here, for two reasons. One, it reminds me of school a little bit, I have to say. But the other reason is that I find that if I don't call on you, everybody tunes in a little bit more. And so whoever wants to, give it a go. Go right ahead.
Okay, I'll start again. So for me, moving to the United States was actually completely random. I had no intention whatsoever to move from where I was. I used to be in Germany when I made the decision to move to the United States for personal reasons. So as I was thinking about this panel, I was thinking about how there are lots of people that I've heard that have a career path already laid out for themselves at 18. I had not. I had no clue whatsoever as to what I wanted to do when I grew up. And moving to the US for personal reason put me in a situation that was very scary. And I can talk a little bit about that later on for sure. So for me, it was very random. And I moved from Germany to Washington, DC initially about 20 years ago or so. And that was a surprising, scary situation that I found myself in. So completely random for me.
And Ale, you also went back to Europe and then come back. So there was quite a bit there.
I did, yeah. I know my journey has been quite complicated and very intricate, if you will, because I'm originally from Italy, spent time in Germany for study and work, moved to Washington, DC, then to San Francisco, then moved back to Geneva, then back to the United States. And the randomness became almost like my pattern. And I put a lot of intention eventually into what this randomness could actually bring for me. And, one of the things that I really like about this discussion is that for me, it's really important to almost take things as they come, while at the same time looking for what makes sense for me, right? Not being scared about, new opportunities that present themselves. Like moving to Geneva, about 15 years ago or so, was fairly random also, but I embraced it, and that opened up a number of other opportunities. So I like the chaotic nature, while looking for patterns, if you will, in the chaos, as it were.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, it started out with a passion for travel, with how I ended up, abroad and through a lot of travel. My parents are from Jamaica. So at a young age, traveling back to their homeland, and it made me really intellectually curious about the world and different places. So when I was picking a job, I went to undergrad and then went straight to grad school. So my first job was out of grad school. I just wanted a job that would allow me to travel. Like, that was the main thing. And once I got there, I learned about these overseas opportunities. You had to at least be with the company for 2 years and be a high performer in order to be considered to go abroad with the company. I was just really strategic about it, in the sense that I was working in, my clients were financial services clients. London was a financial services center. So it really easily aligned with my background and what I was doing at the time. So it was a transfer through my company, a temporary one. And that was more strategic, I would say. When I came back abroad, from being abroad to the States after 3 years living in London, I didn't feel at home anymore. And so this second time around was more of me leaving, seeking a more free life, a life with more peace of mind. And I was looking for somewhere that felt like home organically. And although my family's from Jamaica, Jamaica didn't quite feel like home in the sense of I would want to live there. Now, Portugal had stood out to me from previous visits because it was just an energy there that I cannot explain. Very beautiful country, very welcoming. And even though I didn't know the language, I felt like I belonged there. So I loved it so much. After my first visit, I brought my mother back with me because I wanted her to like experience it. Because I was like, I can't explain. At that point, I had traveled to like over 40 countries, but Portugal stood out. And so when it came time to me to look for, I'd saved up my money, which was a really big, point for me of when I could actually change careers, and also take this break. And I was taking a gap year. Portugal at the top of my list. And because of the pandemic, I ended up having to move over sooner than later, than I thought, a little bit unplanned, just because of the pandemic hit right in the middle of my gap year. And it just happened so organically for me to be here that I was like, I know I belong here. So for me, it was an energy thing. For Portugal. For the UK, it was very strategic.
Wow.
I love that. I love that we're hitting on like the beauty of chaos and structure and listening to your intuition and, allowing the energies of the world to guide you essentially. I feel like I can echo a lot of those sentiments. So I have kind of like a dual approach as well. So the first time I left the States, the first time I decided as a woman to leave the States was when I walked into my study abroad office. So I studied Spanish as a minor, and I got a scholarship to study for 5 years. I got the Bill and Melinda Gates Scholarship, and they gave me 5 years of undergrad. So I finished my degree in 4 years. I studied theater and film in Georgia at the University of Georgia. I also went to Spelman College for a year. Before that, I went to the University of Tennessee. You can already see my gypsy spirit already. I'm like, oh, you're paying for my school? I'm going to go and experiment and see what's up with all these universities. And then I decided to just plant myself in the University of Georgia for 3 years, my last 3 years. So I finished in 4 years, my degree. And I had one more year and I was like, I'm not ready to go into the real world. What do I do? So I said, I'm going to walk into the study abroad office. And literally I had no idea. I just knew I wanted to go to a Spanish speaking country. And everyone in that study abroad office says UGA in Buenos Aires is like a great, phenomenal program. And I did my research and I decided, okay, I'm going to go. So I went to Buenos Aires for a fall semester. I had some of the toughest film professors of my life. I lived with the host family. In this moment, we came to Patagonia for the first time and I was like, what is this place? This is beautiful. And then for the winter semester, I went to Valencia, Spain. Then I graduated. I moved back to LA. I played my cards, pursuing my degree there, pursuing my, after my collegiate career, I started to pursue, becoming a writer and an actor, being a creator in Los Angeles. And it was, as a lot of you, I see folks are from LA or live in LA, I see in the chat box, it's tough. And after a couple of years, I found myself getting a little depressed by, not having had made the moves that I thought I could make. So my sister actually called me and was like, why don't you come to Texas? She was living in Texas at the time. Why don't you come to Texas and like, just, chill, take a break, save some money, and then see what you want to do. And I'm not the kind of person that gets depressed. So I knew I was like in this, like in between a rock and a hard place. I was like, okay, let me listen to this. So I decided to, at that point, work in a bar in Houston, save a lot of money. And I was like, I'm going to go back to Argentina, this time as a woman outside of college. And I was like, but how am I going to do that? Because, I don't want to just, in this moment, I didn't want to just go on my own. I wanted to kind of be a part of a program that facilitated an experience. So I just started to speak about it to folks like, hey, this is what I'm interested in. If you know of any programs, if you know of anything, like I started to also research online. And then a friend of mine was like, I have this coworker who, went to Argentina after college, and he said this program is great. So it was a matter of me speaking it into existence, I guess, and like just asking folks to keep me in mind. I found this program through that. I did my research. I applied. I got a scholarship even to participate. And the reason I was attracted to that program is because I decided to be for 1 year living in the provinces of Argentina, living with host families, teaching English, and also working in these English immersion camps that I'll explain more about later. But I had this really beautiful situation where I was like living, like learning about the culture, but also working with international folks who were students who I had to like, train to teach and work in these English immersion camps. So the power of like knowing your, I would say in this case, your privilege, if you speak English, it's a privilege. You don't realize that if you're living in an English speaking country and you're, trying to survive, but then you go outside of an English speaking country or whatever your native language is, and you see that folks really are interested in mastering this language, realizing that privilege and respecting it and trying to, be in a dynamic relationship with it. So I really found that even though I didn't study to be an English teacher, but I am a very creative person. And I was able to find a holistic English school in the province of Argentina, where I could teach English through dancing, through cooking, through, performance, through all these beautiful things. And actually I was like, you know what, I'm going to stay for a year and then I'm going to go to grad school. I'm going to go back to the States. And I kept pushing back that grad school application. I kept pushing it back. And I was like, okay, let me listen to that. Maybe I'm going to stay here for a while. Maybe this is my graduate school. So I decided to not go to grad school in this moment. I decided to move to Buenos Aires. And this was in 2013. And the rest is history. And I found a very creative community. I mean, as far as the Argentine culture in Buenos Aires, they're very creative people because of the history of this country. You have to be creative because you don't know if tomorrow everything is going to just, shut down and you can't get your money out of the bank. You can't get, the things you need because that, unfortunately or fortunately has been the history. So I've been able to commune with, performance artists, lawyers who work by day as lawyers, and then they go on the train and they're, they work in the circus at night. I just find it very inspiring. And so, yeah, that's how I arrived here. First through, by chance, as Alessandra says, like, I'm just going to walk in this place and see what the world throws at me. And they were like, go to Argentina. And I've been here ever since.
One of the things that I'm hearing across the board, right? All your experiences are so different, and where you live right now is so different. And at the same time, there is that interplay of taking action, of doing some thinking and choosing, and also letting life take you, right? And knowing that it's one step at a time. Like, you can't decide from point A, from point Z and map it out. You kind of have to go to B and C first and then see how you're going to get there. So that's your move to a new country. Now, you're all doing something different. And I'm curious how you chose what you do now. How did you know that was what you wanted to do?
Yeah, for me, at the root of everything that I was doing, even when I worked with Deloitte, I was really big on like just empowering people, whether it was through getting people in STEM and interested in, technology, empowering them with education, knowledge, resources. So initially, when I left Deloitte, I did not know what I wanted to do. I just want to be very clear about that. That was why I was taking the gap year. And the gap year was for me to center myself and to really give myself time and to clear my mind. You don't realize how hard it is to make decisions when there's so many different things going on around you. So sometimes you do need to maybe take yourself and put yourself in a new environment so you can regather your thoughts and a clarified state of mind. But again, like I said, at the root of everything that I had done, even at work, it was around empowering people. So initially I thought I was going to build an app for high school students, and I wanted to show them different career paths, because it seemed like from some of the volunteer work that I had been doing over the years, a lot of students, they only get the same teacher, doctor, lawyer careers presented to them. And I think that's why some students are a bit uninspired in school. And so I kept thinking, like, there's so many careers now, and maybe the students would be more engaged in school if they actually had something exciting to look forward to, and we made it make sense for them. So the goal of the app was to get these different careers in front of the students through live chats, similar to something like this. And so I signed up for a course, and the course was to learn how to build an app. I already had a technical background from my work at Deloitte. That course was really interesting because I realized how hard it was to do it the way I was trying to do it. But what ended up happening is during this time, I was doing expat chats, which is something that I started to get the insights from Black expats living abroad, because when I was trying to make a decision about which country I wanted to live in, I was in all these expat communities, but I found that the default was a white Eurocentric view. So I was having a really hard time getting some insights about what the Black experience was like outside of some of the major cities like London, which has a very big Black population, expat population. And so that gave me the idea to kind of pivot my app idea from, or my app desire to build an app from building, and I'm still going to do that at some point. I just need time and money. But I decided to pivot into building the app around Black expats, and decided to just go with it. I made a goal to myself, a promise that I was going to launch the app by the end of 2020. And I launched December 31st at 11:45 p.m. It wasn't perfect, but I was like, I made a promise to myself that I was going to get this app out. And even though the app that I started with wasn't the app that I ended with, it was something that, again, as I started taking action and following my passion, the steps that I needed to take started to make sense. So my biggest piece of advice to anyone would be, you do have to start. I think a lot of people are scared to start to do anything because they are like scared to fail publicly. And I'm like, you have to not be afraid of the failure, because I actually did try to do other things. And when I say fail, I realized I didn't like them. I tried to do coaching at one point and I realized I wasn't good at it. And so I was like, I'm not empowering people because you're just not good at coaching. So I did try that. And I also did freelancing. And the freelancing was actually great. It was very insightful. I loved the role I was in. I was working in a really phenomenal role with a travel company, travel group. And I just needed to focus on my app at some point. So I stopped freelancing because I wanted to give my full self to the app. But that's how I ended up. It wasn't something that when I left my job, I knew I was going into this space. It was something that evolved organically from, like you said, or earlier, taking the action, right? And you start to see things as you go, but you never know what Z looks like when you start A to B. Sorry, that was a pretty long-winded answer to the question, but I just wanted to kind of walk people through the process.
Hey, sometimes it's a long-winded road, right? That that takes us where we want to get. Yeah.
I can offer my perspective. So for me, knowing where to go and what to do was pretty difficult at the beginning, because I came from Europe and I just graduated. I'd been working as a teacher. And when I moved to the United States, I actually had no idea how to find a job. And I had no idea how to write a resume. I had no idea about the country. I was pretty much in culture shock. And coming from a culture, the Italian culture, in which you feel like if you don't have the right connections, if you don't come from the right family, if you don't come from the right place, you're not really going to find a good job. I had to really overcome that paralysis almost, and that mindset that I was in. And I didn't even know what was possible, and for me, being in the United States gave me the opportunity to look at things differently and kind of overcoming the culture shock and really looking at what this country could provide that I wasn't going to get as easily in Italy or in other parts of Europe, though Italy is definitely used to be particularly bad in that sense. I was able to think about the skills that I had accumulated and acquired in Europe as something that could be transferable. And that's when it clicked. That's when I thought, okay, I can actually do something different than what I thought I was going to be doing. I thought I had a very set path. I thought I couldn't change. And, being, in an environment in which I could think about my skills as transferable, all of a sudden it opened up a number of opportunities. That's why I was mentioning earlier this, embracing the randomness and embracing the things that life presents, and then take action and be intentional about what to do with that. And when I was in the United States, I also was teaching. My first job was as an Italian and German teacher at the various schools. I realized that wasn't really something that I was passionate about, and also financially wasn't super viable more than anything. So I tried to figure out what can I do with what I've accumulated skill-wise. And that's when I decided to go back to school and kind of reskill myself and become more adept in corporate education. And that's when I decided to go into the career that I have right now, which has taken various shapes and forms. But really that moment of like, oh, I can actually be a lot more than what my culture taught me to be. That was the aha moment for me.
That's beautiful. I mean, I definitely, I'm inspired by both of you, just hearing your stories. I mean, I had the pleasure of interviewing Shar last year, so I kind of know a little bit about her story, but I'm still learning more as, we're changing all the time. And Alessandra, your courage and your, your desire to just, continue to develop and see what's on the other side of the fence is really inspiring to hear. I definitely echo and feel and identify with the sentiment of embracing the unknown and taking action. As I mentioned before, I was thinking of going to graduate school after this 1-year program, right after college, and I decided not to. So I took a leap of faith and moved to Buenos Aires, which is basically it's the biggest city in the whole country. It's like as if let's say the United States had New York and the rest were like, I don't know, very small provinces. There's one main city here. Everything comes through and goes out of Buenos Aires. So I went there and I said, well, there's a big expat community in Buenos Aires. One thing that I love about Buenos Aires, one of the things that kept me, I guess, full of hope is that I love that I could sit at a table and be in front of, an Irish person, a South African person, a person from Canada, a person from Los Angeles, but I never met in California, but I'm meeting here in Buenos Aires, like this beautiful serendipity and this really, open international culture to be in this country. Has a very complex and beautiful history that is allowing us to be here, to share and to grow. So I decided to stay, and I was like, okay, what I want to do, I was very strategic in the sense of, okay, I want to be able to make dollars, to work remotely, to put my hard skills, to develop my hard skills, which were in public relations. I had worked in Los Angeles with a PR private firm for a while. So I was very, interested in that. Also just as an artist, if I'm sure we've got some creative folks on the line, you essentially have to be your own marketer. So I was like, okay, let me put this to the test as well. Let me grow as well. So I started to just, again, throw the net out there and let folks know that I was available. And then I started getting these freelance marketing, community building. This is before Instagram was even a thing. I remember coming to this country and no one had Instagram. And I had already actually started to work with some startups in the States. I'm like, you all need to get Instagram and now I'm like, everyone get off Instagram, go to Black Expat, do other things. But in this time I was building communities for different startups, and I wanted to, so this kind of work started coming into my lap. Essentially, I started to organize my time working remotely before it was even a big thing. Like now, of course, during the pandemic, where a lot of us are figuring out how to do this, but I had started to kind of fine tune this skill and work this muscle. So I did that in order to, pay the bills and keep a roof over my head and to save and all these things. But then on the other side, I wanted to really be involved in the creative community in Buenos Aires. So I started to, play. I started to meet musicians, meet artists, figure out how I can be on certain stages. There's the equivalent of Broadway that's in Buenos Aires. It's a long street with lots of theaters, lots of beautiful productions happen there. So I started to have this play with the duality of, okay, I need to work online to make money and try to do something that I'm passionate about, which is building community, work in marketing, PR, but also I want to engage with the creative community. So that has brought me to, I guess, one of the most recent things I was doing before the pandemic is I was working with this art gallery in Buenos Aires that focused on, folks who were tourists who had a day or maybe they had a week in the city and they wanted to get to know the city through learning about the street art and graffiti, and that, you know, through that you learn about the economy, you learn about the history, you learn about why the artists are doing what they're doing, and just being the curator of that and working in the art gallery. So hopefully we'll be able to get back to that and we won't have to do virtual galleries anymore. But that's one thing that I was doing in tandem with, you know, working with different startups and helping building their community online and, you know, doing marketing and things like that. So I definitely, I think for me, it was a balance of, you know, how can I transfer or how can I like create a more holistic space within myself to combine my hard skills and my soft skills, because I also love to facilitate, you know, workshops and so, you know, being in front of the camera, behind the camera, producing videos, you know, performing in things. So it's just always been like, you know, how can I ground myself by, you know, showing light to all these different sides of me, while still being able to pay my bills, you know, while still being able to feed myself and going home every now and then. Shar, you brought up the concept of home. I remember being, and also Alessandra, you brought up this idea of like being in cultural shock. And I remember being like, you know, I'm going home to the States, but I'm going not to my apartment. I don't have my things there. I'm going to like be at my sister's place. I'm going to be at my mom's place. I'm not going to my place, you know? So I started feeling like, okay, where's home for me? Maybe my home is in Argentina because I have my place here. I have my, you know, my jobs here. I have my family and friends here. And so this idea of like how to be okay with, transitioning your home in a certain place, because there's a time when you're kind of like, okay, I need to be free and available, which means if you put your roots down, you're not available to understand where you need to be. But then there also comes a time where you want to plant your roots somewhere. And with that comes culture shock. And from what I understood intuitively, a reverse culture shock, because when I did go back to the States to see my family and friends, I was like, whoa, things are so different here. And I don't really agree with some of these things, but like, I don't want to be the radical and be like, you know, hey, you know, it's just always on a soapbox. So I was like, okay, this is also another sign that I'm setting up my home in Argentina, actually. And I feel more comfortable for whatever reason there. You know, maybe I get these curious stares because there's a history in Argentina where there aren't many Black folks here. And we can go into that in another conversation, but literally people would stare at me because I was just like this alien, I guess, this foreign creature, that they had only seen Black people on television at this time when I first moved here. So, but I didn't feel like people were staring at me as if I were in South Georgia, like you shouldn't be here kind of stare. It was more of a curious stare versus, you know, so this also this idea of home, like, am I comfortable in my body? Do I feel like the community around me is going to support me or not? And then how can I make a living for myself? So a lot of factors to throw at everyone right now, but that's a part of the journey that to help me arrive here, essentially.
And just wanted to kind of comment on one of the things you were saying, Mariela, about, you know, trying to figure out how you can combine both the, you know, making money because you have to pay the bills and not losing your soul, right? And really doing something that is important and beautiful for you. And for me, you know, the idea of finding that moment and finding that path was very difficult at the beginning. I didn't know whether I was going to be able to do that for the reasons that I mentioned earlier. I didn't know what I was capable of. And I had very much of a binary vision of the world. Either I'm going to be doing something that I love, like, you know, working in the humanities and studying and, you know, studying literature and teaching literature, or I'm going to be in a dreary, awful job. And it was interesting to really think about how I could apply the things that I loved in an environment that actually could help me pay the bills. And that's when I made the decision to transition into corporate education, because the education component was really what fueled me, right? And a variety of other aspects. So I think you really put your finger on something that's absolutely crucial when, you know, anyone looks into career changes, and particularly in an environment that's completely new, because it's not your culture, it's not your, you know, you being culture shock, taking that as an opportunity to say, oh, maybe I could think about something that I hadn't thought before, right? Because you're exposed to the new, the strange, and the different. So
Yeah, Alexandra, you hit, and both of you, Mariella, hit on such a good point, because sometimes the act of moving abroad helps to facilitate the career change. And what I mean by that is, for me, because the app was going to be self-funded, I needed to move somewhere where the cost of living could support the lifestyle plus the financial runway that I needed to be able to, when you first start a company, a lot of times it is self-funded. And so you need to factor that into your decision as well. And so for the quality of lifestyle that I have here compared to London, which was the other place that was really high on my list, it's half the price. And then compared to the US, it's not half, it's like maybe 25 to 40% cheaper. But what I mean is, I was, part of me being able to do the career change was facilitated by finding a better cost of living, that, you know what I mean, is allowing me to stretch my money further, which is needed for me to be a social entrepreneur and fund the app. So that's just something I want people to think about, because in some cases, just due to the nature of our home countries, like for example, healthcare as an individual who doesn't work for a big company can drain so much of your budget every month in the US. Abroad, even though again, you pay with taxes, right? It's still easy. When I say easier, I found it easier to live here, have good healthcare, have access to good food, good housing, and still be within a reasonable budget. So it's just something to consider.
Wow, there are so many things. We could have a whole other conversation and panel about. But there's one question I have for you, because all of the stuff you're sharing right now, there's one thing that let me put it this way. As you know, I work with career changers, and a lot of the time, when we hear other people's stories, it makes sense to us that they embraced what they liked, or they embraced their transferable skills, or they went with the flow a little bit, or even when it was scary, excuse me, they could do it. But when it comes to us, that's a whole other, that's a whole other thing. So I was wondering if you have an example of one moment that you were scared, where fear came in for you, and how you went past it. Either you let it go or you did it anyway. How did you handle that fear in one specific moment about either changing careers or moving?
I'd like to jump in there with some family, some sentimental value, let's say. So I have two nieces that, it was there. I was so conflicted with but I need to be here with my nieces in Houston and be the auntie that's there for them and help raise them and be a part of that community that, shows them, just how to be beautiful beings. And so I was like, okay, so I was torn, how can I still be here for my nieces, but be so far away, literally almost at the end of the world, or as you said, Patagonia is almost at the end of the world. And I remember just not deciding to not let that eat me up. And I had and of course there are other people who go through the same thing. Oh my, such and such is having a baby, these big moments in your family's lives or your friends' lives that you want to be there for, you don't want to miss out. So this fear of missing out, I guess, is what that would be. It's like FOMO, right? Hard fear of missing out. I don't want to be absent. I don't want to be, I want to participate, but how can I do that from so far away? So I just remember having just a moment with my nieces and looking into their eyes. And I felt like we had this was also one of my nieces. She couldn't even walk. She couldn't talk, but I got this message from her, go, you need to be there. And because you are going to be at your best, you're going to be able to learn something that you can't learn here in Houston, Texas. And eventually we will meet again, either here or there. And whenever we meet, I know that I'm going to learn from you. It's hard to put it in words, but it was a moment of understanding. And, maybe this was just myself speaking to myself, but looking at my niece in this moment, but I didn't want to feel bad about it. I didn't want to feel anchored to a place where I didn't necessarily want to be, but I did want to unpack this feeling of like, why do I feel like I can't do it because of someone else, but this is what I want to do inside. So the way that I am remedying that is by really living up to that truth. Why am I here? I'm here to do X, Y, and Z. What is my purpose? How can I be true to myself so that, in essence, I am also sharing this with my niece and showing her that she can do this too. And that, when I come back home to her and I'm speaking different languages, or I'm, showing her different ways to eat her food, or different ways to, be in the world, that is another gift that I can bring to her, that I may not have been able to had I decided to stay in Houston. So I know a lot of folks struggle with that, how do I leave my friends or my family behind? And it's a huge obstacle to get through. I'm sure that our other speakers can speak on that, but I think it's about really honoring your truth and your purpose, and knowing that things are going to be okay, because you're deciding to do that, and not to allow that angst or guilt to take over and make things unclear, because then you're going to always be like, should I do it? Should I not? Should I do it? Should I not? And you're stuck, and you don't take action.
Yeah, I think, Mariella, you're so right. I mean, anybody who considers moving to a different country faces that, and I certainly have faced that. I keep on facing it for the last 20 years or so. This feeling of, being far away from family, friends, and, how do you continue to cultivate that relationship? So that's definitely something that it doesn't go away. You just cope, at least for me, I learn how to live with it and learn how to mitigate that, but it's definitely something that's always with me. Another thing I wanted to mention about what was a scary moment for me was when I moved from Germany to Washington, D.C., and I felt like I was in this between my teaching job that wasn't ultimately what I wanted to do, not financially not viable, just it wasn't fulfilling me, and what would come next. And I didn't know what that next was. So I felt like in this limbo, and I felt stuck and didn't know where to begin and what to do and how to move forward. That was probably the scariest moment, because I felt like I might fail. I might not have a career. I might not go anywhere. I'd be stuck in this country, didn't know very many people, in culture shock. What am I going to do? And it was only when I started looking at those transferable skills that I was mentioning earlier. And I remember literally looking at a CD-ROM that I was using for one of my classes. And I thought, somebody must be building these. And I was looking at online lessons, like somebody must be building this stuff. And maybe that somebody has similar skills like I do. Maybe that somebody is somebody who has a teaching background or a background in the humanities. Lo and behold, as I did some research, there were in fact university programs that taught that stuff. And that opened up the whole next steps for my career. But I would say that probably one of the scariest moments was that in between, I'm not happy with what I'm doing and I have no clue whatsoever as to where to go next.
Yeah, the fear is actually constant. I mean, when I say constant, it's the part of the journey. There's this quote that I really love, and I'm going to share it because hopefully it'll help someone. But they said, regret will haunt you more than the fear, right? You know what I mean? Like the regret will haunt you more. So take the chance. I've had so many moments. The biggest one I would say was when I was going to quit. I've been with the company for 10 years. And I grew up in a situation, a single parent household where, financially, it was paycheck to paycheck and a lot of debt. So my mindset growing up, watching my mother work really, really hard and, taking care of me and my sister and giving us, the best quality life. She did a great job. But there was always that financial insecurity of like a major thing could happen and, we could be in a very compromising situation. That always was hanging over me as a child. And I grew up and never let go of that insecurity. So even though I grew up as an adult and my financial situation had changed, I had this really huge financial insecurity that was keeping me at a job because it was paying well. And the company treated me well overall. I still, anyone who's interested, I'd be like, yes, go work for the company. But the lifestyle wasn't conducive to the type of way I wanted to live my life. It was very high stress and a lot of, it just wasn't putting me in a position where I was going to live a healthy life. So because of that, I stayed for a long time. So quitting was scary because when you choose to bet on yourself, you don't know. You don't know. It could be a huge success. It could be a huge failure. I didn't have any other entrepreneurs in my family. So when my gap year was finished, even though it got interrupted by COVID, I had to make a decision. Was I going to go back to corporate America, or was I going to bet on myself and continue to pursue these passion projects that I started? And that fear of looking at how much financial runway I have and looking at the security of a 9-to-5, because thankfully the UK team that I had worked with has still extended and let me know, like, hey, if at any time you want to come back, just let us know. And it was very promising because I was also going to be able to get sponsored to live in the UK with that company. But my heart told me to continue going with, even though it was so unknown and the financial situation is a lot, there's a range of what can happen on the entrepreneurial span on that. But I just had to do it. And that's because in my mind, if I've spent all this time and I've gotten this far, there's no way that, not to get all spiritual, everybody, the universe is just gonna be like, all right, we're gonna drop you off here, you're done, And I also am not afraid to work hard. So I'm not too good to, if I have to go back to working, I'm not too good to sweep floors. Like, I'm not too good to work hard to make a living. And so because I have faith in myself and my skill set, and in what I was pursuing, for me, that trumped the fear. But the fear is always there. The fear is there because of the fact that you're doing uncomfortable things because you're growing. So if you are seeing yourself in these fearful situations, it's probably a sign that you're doing something worth doing because you're growing. So don't shy away from those opportunities because it has been the most rewarding. This experience since I started my gap year back in October of 2019 and quit my job, I would not trade it for the world. Even the uncertainty with COVID hitting, all these things, it has been so rewarding, the liberty at which I can live my life right now. I would not trade that for a paycheck.
Yes. And I just want to say, like, the fear, I mean, of course, the fear is there, right? I think that it's just a part of keeping our spidey senses on. But there's like a difference between fear that keeps you like in a box because you're so afraid to come out. And there's the fear of like, okay, when you're about to jump into a cold pool and you're like, okay. And it's a mixture of like, I don't know, it's a fear that is a healthy kind of fear, I would say. So I'm sure, Aurora, you can speak to that a little more. But I agree with everyone here that there's this fine balance of like not letting the fear eat you up, but allowing the fear to serve you, essentially.
Well, I have so much to say about fear. But very quickly, I do want to offer a couple of things. One is, Mariela, I think you're 100% correct that there is some fear that it's excitement. That kind of fear, I feel it's the fear that comes with your desire. The more we want something, the more that we get scared we're not going to get it. That's not a bad thing. That's actually a really good indication you're moving towards what you want. But also the other thing that's helped me a lot about handling my fear is to understand that fear is not necessarily a reflection of what is out there. And so there's a fear, for example, that comes with, I don't know what I'm going to do next. That can be existential, but it's just because we as human beings do not do well when we don't know, but it doesn't mean that the opportunities are not out there. It just means like we haven't seen them yet, or maybe we're unfolding, right? And so that's so scary, but it's not scary because there's something to really be scared about. So I just want to put it, out there if this resonates with you. I have two more questions before we go to audience Q&A. One is, okay. So it's my experience that before we do certain things, we think they're not possible, right? And then we do them, and it's like, of course. So I was wondering if there's something that shifted for you in this process of moving abroad or changing careers that before you thought was not possible, and now you could tell, yes, it's possible? What is that?
I can go. It is possible to move to another country when you don't know the language and still be able to thrive and survive. Sometimes you have to learn as you go. You will not have all the answers. I'm in a my language course is actually right now, but I'm missing it. But it's playback. But I'm in a Portuguese language class right now. It's interactive. But I didn't let that stop me from moving to Portugal because I think the language barrier. Now, I don't think this is true for every country. Enough people in Lisbon speak English that I am able to get by. This may not be true in every country that you go to, but fortunately, and the people here are very gracious because that's another thing. They see you're trying, they are helpful still. And even if you don't know any at all, like when I first got here, they were still graceful and very welcoming and helpful. So I think it is important to learn the language, but I don't think it should stop you from moving to certain countries. Definitely do some research. But I didn't think it was possible before to move abroad and not know the language in a foreign country, but it is possible.
For me, I was alluding to that earlier. What became apparent that was possible is to really look beyond what I thought I was going to be, because that was my heritage, because that's the culture that I came from, the environment that I came from, and seeing how combining my own culture and the culture that I was in actually made me a better person, kind of looking at combining the best of both worlds made me see what was there that I couldn't see before. Kind of opening my eyes through the lens of my Italian culture and my European experience, in Germany, and really taking the most out of the culture here in the United States was, something that I couldn't see before. Some of the things that I got, for example, from being in the United States have to do with, being very purposeful, being very clear. There are lots of objective driven, rather than just very chaotic, which is very much Italian to some extent. I know it sounds stereotypical, but it kind of is. But then infusing that chaotic, I don't know, warm, communicative, aspect of where I was coming from actually made me see and made me become somebody who was a little bit different from what I would have been, if I had remained in Europe and in Italy. So kind of opening myself up to both cultures and embracing them both and making the most out of them.
Ooh, and that's an ongoing process, right? I find myself still, there's always something, right? Especially with social media now and everything that you can see going on. It's like, but how can I go back to LA in March for Black Lives Matter? But I'm already, I'm so far away, and I can participate and I can teach people here about the, Afro-Argentine history. There's a way to combine, your adopted culture and then your native culture. One thing that I learned, and listen up, yes, you can pay off debts by living in another country. One of the things that always breaks my heart is like people who I meet here who are from mostly the States, because in the States you can you can easily accrue a lot of debt with student loans, with credit cards and all that. I can't speak to any other countries, but it would break my heart to hear that they are deciding to go back because they need to pay student loans. They need to go back to find a job in the States to pay the student loans or to pay their debts. And then it's like, oh, but you want to be here. Your heart wants to be here. There has to be a way. So I was like, just figuring out like, how can I show people that it is possible? So it is possible. You can do it. Like Shar was saying before, you just have to be strategic about, how can I make sure that I'm living comfortably, living in a place that still is with, the lifestyle that I want to live. But of course, that means you have to cut down on certain things so that you can balance that and you can pay off your debts. You can. I'm still working on it, but it's happening, and I don't feel suffocated by it. I don't feel like I need to make a move back to the States in order to do it, because of course I can move back to the States, get a restaurant gig, let's say, and earn a lot of money. Well, actually not even now, because the pandemic is shutting down a lot of restaurants, you see. So what if I had made that decision and then you have to live your truth. And I say that to say, money is always a chewy topic when making these decisions. But if I've learned anything, is that when you can be creative and just continue to listen to yourself, you can do it. So I know that's probably something that is keeping people literally, in chains and not making a big move, but you can do it. And also, just to balance off this sentiment, because I do work remotely and I know that it is very privileged. Like, a lot of folks don't have the ability to do that. They might not have the desire to do that. But if you do that, you have to figure out how to be socially responsible as well. You cannot, you can do it, but it just wouldn't sit well for me to be in another country, to be earning, dollars in a country that's economy is not doing well, and to just, be not privy to how I can support, local designers, local producers, from food to clothes to, people who have different talents, and to just be aware of the culture that you're living in and not just live behind your computer, right? So to be a participant, an active participant in the culture that is adopting you, essentially. So, you save money so that you can have your lifestyle, so that you can pay your debts off. But also, if you are in a place where you can, I would recommend like giving back however you can, or participating in the economy however you can, so that you're not so displaced, if that makes sense. But yes, you can pay your debts off.
Yeah, I can echo that sentiment, Mariella. You definitely, I paid off my debt and became debt free during my gap year. So, it's very possible. I did make a lot of sacrifices and life changes, of course, prior to taking my gap year to save up enough money, but it's definitely possible. And on the part about understanding our privilege, I do want to say it's important that you are legally abroad. So that's going through the proper visa process and routes. Because if you are just abroad, you're not on a visa contributing through taxes and things like that, that is taking advantage of the country that you're in and not respecting it. So I would just highly encourage people to go through the proper visa process.
Yeah, and on that, I know there's questions about it. I'm so sorry, they're doing some work outside, so you might hear some noise on my end. But we're not going to answer immigration questions today, just because like, it's such a complicated issue. You should really check with the appropriate government office where you're planning to move. All right, so I have my last question for you, and everybody else, you can also think about what questions you want to ask from the audience. My question for you is: do you feel you have a purpose?
Absolutely. And my purpose, I think I'm able to explore through my passions, and I made time to do passion projects, which the Expat Chats is a live series that I still do, interviewing people and sharing stories of Black expats living abroad. I'm passionate about that. My purpose is to empower people. And that's where I always, regardless of everything I'm doing, whether it's through knowledge, I mentioned that earlier, that's the common thread. I like to do a lot of different things, but the biggest thing is empowering people, whether it's through transparency of sharing my story and things that I've gone through, or just sharing other people's stories, right? Making sure that, people understand things are possible. Representation really, really matters. And so being able to hear other women share their stories, being able to hear people who, have moved abroad on a limb, these things are inspiring. So I think my purpose is to just help empower people through storytelling, community building, and just sharing information and resources.
I agree. My purpose as well is to empower myself and other people by helping us and helping myself recognize our creative power. So I find that one of my superhero tools is to always be curious. And maybe this curiosity has, helped me to arrive here. But, if I feel like I can't do something, I ask myself why. I contemplate. I set time out of my day to be in solitude and reflect and meditate and write and then make decisions from that standpoint versus you know, this unhealthy fear that we talked about before, like, okay, well, I need to pay bills, so maybe I need to, and it's like that. It's like, wait a minute, what do I need? Like, how can I serve myself and serve, you know, others at the same time? But it's this, you know, as Shara is saying, empowering yourself, empowering other folks. And I think that there's this mirror, there's this trickle effect that happens with that. And so I feel like that is my purpose, to show myself, to be a light unto myself and be a light in the world. So let's do this.
Yeah, I think I echo very much what Marielle and Shar have said. And for me, the purpose has kind of evolved over the years. You know, when I was, you know, a lot younger, I was probably more kind of selfishly motivated by wanting to, you know, be surrounded by people I loved and thrive myself, and therefore make others thrive. And, you know, as I grew in myself, in my career, I kind of expanded that purpose into, you know, empowering others, you know, and for example, you know, as I started managing teams, really looking at how I could help people on my teams and others grow and develop into what they wanted to be. And what's a lot on my mind right now is, you know, empowering especially women to kind of get out of the rut that I was in 20 years ago and 10 years ago, and, you know, occasionally again, because I feel that there's so much underprivilege in certain categories. And, you know, I would like to put myself to the service of kind of getting rid of the injustices and really empowering, especially younger women, but, you know, women in general, also through sharing these stories and kind of making myself available to support in any way that I can. That's been a lot on my mind in the last year and a half, as I hear about horrific news of, you know, women being killed by their partners and by their husbands and whatnot. So that's been a lot on my mind these days. So that's kind of one of my areas of purpose.
You know, this is such a beautiful conversation. And one thing that we don't talk very much in general, like I think a lot of cultural conversation around career and what to do in life is always about how to achieve your goals. But there's something that if you actually achieve your goal, if you grow as a human being into yourself, you know, I hate the word normal, but really like what happens, the healthy way of growing is that you want to help others. That is really we create this loop. You know, it's either a healthy loop where we help each other, and the more we get help, the more we want to help, right? And here I mean like really uplifting, really making things possible. Or we get into this like, oh no, I cannot, or I have to work so hard, and then the world is something where we have to compete. And I see it a lot then when people open their heart and really find what they want to do, the next step is how can I empower others all the time. Okay, so I'm going to invite you to put your questions for the panelists in the chat. If it's for just one panelist, you can say who it is for. And also, I'm going to put a link right here in the chat. It's a link to a spreadsheet. And I want to invite you, if you would like to, let me just grab that link again, just to make sure I have the right one. If you would like to share your LinkedIn profile, your email or website and your name with people here, you can add it to this spreadsheet. Now, there's a couple of things I'm going to ask you. I'm going to leave the spreadsheet available for everybody for 48 hours. Do not share it with people on social media or things like that, okay? It's just for us here in this call. Sometimes I get asked for people, oh, I met somebody so interesting, and, you know, can you put me in touch? And I really cannot do that. So this way, if you want to volunteer your information to stay in touch with other people, you can. All right, let's see. What are your questions? Anybody who has questions here?
So there was a question in the beginning. Someone asked about numbers, approximate costs, and I know that varies a lot, right? I believe it was Deanna who may have had to drop from the call. But one thing that I can encourage people to do, this is where the community comes into play. If you're interested in a particular country, definitely tap into those expat communities and take the costs and insight that they give you relative to your lifestyle. So I always say that because there are tools such as Numbeo, numbeo.com, that, it's a cost of living estimator for different cities. And it's nice because you can compare it to your current city. But I always say, think about it relative to your cost of living. I mean, your lifestyle, because there's always going to be a range. And I know there are certain things that as a woman living alone, security's top of mind for me, right? I need to be somewhere with secured entry, just things like that may make the costs go up. So don't be so caught up in like a particular number as it is like what makes sense for you specifically. The way that I got my number was to look at, of course, the expenses I had to have, right? Housing, healthcare, things for like, internet, things like that. When I had my car, I was still paying car insurance on in the US. Just, these, I know for sure these are fixed costs. Then I always had a little cushion. Plus I have an emergency budget, but this cushion every month was just because there's some things when you first move abroad that you may not anticipate, whether it's deposits, the cost of your visa, all these things like that. So make sure you have that covered. But don't forget that certain expenses actually go away depending on where you're going to. So for example, like for me, once now that I'm here, that $250 I was paying every month in health insurance in the US is now covered because I pay taxes here, if that makes any sense. It's free. It's a free public healthcare system. So there are certain things that go away. And also I don't drive here. And I recently, like as in last week, sold my car. So now that's another expense I don't have. So there's all these different things where some of the expenses that you do have will change abroad. And then there's expenses here that I maybe haven't thought about yet. So far, I don't have any new expenses here that I haven't thought about yet. But I'm just saying there could be some that come up. So there's something to consider.
Okay, we have a question right here. What advice would you give to someone adjusting to a new country and still figuring out what to do next?
I'd like to jump in on this one and also piggyback on what Shar was saying. So like, as far as, transitioning into a new, budget system, let's say, I find that it becomes really helpful when you can meet new folks and get to engage with the community that's around you. So for this question that Anna writes here, if you have a skill that you love doing, you love sharing, sometimes it's nice to do like an exchange. I know, especially in the States, we're like, no, I need to be paid for my time. But actually, if you're in a new country, if you can offer like, I don't know, hey, I'll translate this thing for you. If you feel like you have something that can, be equally, beneficial for you that this person might have, let's say they have a lot of, folks in their network that you're interested in getting to know, or they have, I've sat with folks in Starbucks coffee shops who are like, grown ass people who just want to sit down and have a conversation with me so that they can work in, their profession in English. And so if I have any questions, I might reach out to them about something, that their business might know, like, if they're a lawyer, let's say, that's a very strategic exchange. So if you can start to meet folks, and it's actually easier now that a lot of people are online, I would say definitely, as much as I have this social resistance to Instagram and Facebook groups when you are living abroad are legit. Like you meet so many people who like have been there before you, and they say, okay, this will save you time, energy if you do X, Y, and Z. So definitely plug into those groups. And then also, start to see how you can do some exchanges with folks so that you aren't necessarily giving up so much of your time and energy and your skill, but you're building connections with folks and getting to, build some reciprocity there as well. So that would be a piece of advice that I would share.
One other thing I would add to that, I completely agree with engaging with several groups or even meetups. There are lots of interest groups that really focus on the specifics, and meetups are pretty much quite ubiquitous. I would say for one's own sanity, it's useful to also connect to your expat community, because as you're adapting to a new country, a new culture, it's absolutely important to really connect with people from that culture and other cultures who live there, but also your own. I found it to be very, very healthy. So, finding your Facebook group or your meetup from your own country or group of origin can be also quite useful as you're trying to adjust.
Yeah, that's really good advice. I moved here to the United States from Italy as well, and the first few years I didn't know any Italian, and it was a big difference when then I was back in having a little bit of Italians in my community. It was a really big difference. So there's another question here. I love this question. Do you think you will move to another country?
I can start with this one. I actually have multiple times. I was mentioning earlier, moved from Germany to the US, Geneva, Switzerland, back to the US. For me, it's almost like a bug. When you start exploring new countries, new cultures, it becomes so rewarding that taking the risk of moving again is exciting, and once I knew that I could actually do it, and I'd done it multiple times, I could definitely do it again. I would say, Marielle was alluding to that earlier, at some point it might be useful or interesting to set roots. And that's probably going to be the time when I might not want to move again. But once you're an expat, it's very likely to just remain intercontinental and multi-continental, I would say. So that's the way it is for me anyway.
Yeah, Alexandra, I echo the sentiment. It's I don't know, it's very invigorating moving abroad and living abroad and getting all these interesting experiences. So I wouldn't be shocked if at some point I ended up in another country, because I'm really enjoying the lifestyle living abroad, and the liberty at which you can live your life, to me, a little bit more at ease than my home country. So I find it to be very rewarding abroad. Yeah. So I wouldn't be shocked. I love Portugal, but one thing with me is I'm very gracious with myself, and I change my mind all the time. So if tomorrow I found an opportunity somewhere else, I may just go. But I'm 36 now. So as I get older and I don't have a family yet, those are things that I do think about, because, as women, you have limited eggs, let's be honest. So if you're thinking about children, if you're thinking about all these things, and having a family, I think that will shift as things go. So I still keep that in mind, that if I get to a point where I want to have a family and children, I would probably settle in a country as opposed to hopping around so much. But it probably won't be my home country though.
Yes, absolutely. There's so many beautiful places that I want to know, in this lifetime. So I'm totally, I'm a firm believer in, if I feel, I arrived here because I was calling this place to me, let's say, and to get kind of, esoteric and spiritual with this. I didn't know. I was like, I could go anywhere. I want to be I just needed to be in a place where there's a lot of nature. That could be, several places in the world. And so I really feel, that if you can find people that you vibe with and you feel like you're at your best, I'm willing 1000% to be living in another place at any given time.
All right. And if there's no other questions here, I'm going to ask my last question to wrap this up. And here's my question for you. What do you wish somebody had told you to encourage you on your path? What are some words you want to share with everybody who's here today, but also, we're recording this, so anybody that might listen to this in the future?
Life is short. You have something to discover within yourself and in the world. So, respect that and have fun with that.
Yeah, I would say just start. I think so many of us wait for the perfect conditions. It'll never be perfect. do not underestimate the power that you have within yourself to make your own dreams come true. You would not be given that vision for no reason. You know, if you envision a certain lifestyle, if you envision a certain goal, a certain purpose, a certain way of life, you were given that vision for a reason, not for it to just sit there and die, you know? So believe in yourself and understand that you are far more powerful than you think you are. But the only way to test that muscle is to put yourself in action. I know sometimes we can be paralyzed by all of the what ifs. If you're an overthinker like me, I encourage you to be pragmatic, but also lead with passion, and lead with your purpose and with your intention. And even when things go wrong, it's not the end of the world. As long as you're alive each day, if you're on this, listening to this, I mean, you have access to the internet, more than likely you're a literate person, you can figure it out. Like, you have far more resources than people way before us had, and they all figured it out as well. So, you know, take that courage and your resources and go with it, and don't wait for the perfect conditions, because they really aren't perfect conditions.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I would say, you know, I wish somebody had told me, don't be afraid to put yourself out there and start. Put yourself out there, because by doing so, something will happen, and it will help you figure out what to do next. Don't wait for something to happen to you. Make it happen just by taking risks, and trust in yourself. Trust that you don't have to be perfect to succeed. You can be your imperfect being and bringing the gifts that you bring to the world, and something will happen because you're going to make it happen.
Beautiful. On that note, I want to say that in my experience too, there is something that's a little bit of a call and response, you know, from the universe, not as a you get whatever you want, you just decide and it's going to be what you want, but that when you take a step in the direction that your heart pulls you in, something else takes a step towards you. And I've really seen it in unexpected ways. So I am going to wrap this up, the official portion of this event. I want to invite you, if you haven't and you feel like it, you don't have to, add your LinkedIn or contact information to the spreadsheet I shared and leave it up there for 48 hours, so you can connect with anybody here that wants to stay connected, and of course you panelists as well, if you want to add anything from you there so people can find you or join your app or anything, right, your initiative. Thank you all for coming. I'm going to stop the recording now.